What does it take for a war film to make the men who fought it tremble again? When truth bleeds through reel and smoke, no amount of Hollywood gloss can hide the horror beneath. These are not popcorn spectacles, but mirror images of hell recreated frame by frame. Here are 15 World War II films so accurate they shocked the very veterans who lived them. Number 15. Das Boot, 1981. When Wolfgang Petersen created Das Boot, it was not just a movie, it was a deep dive into the nightmare of underwater warfare. There were no heroes or speeches, only men locked inside a steel tube fighting for breath and sanity as depth charges rained down. The story followed the German submarine U-96 during the Battle of the Atlantic, showing the monotony, hunger fear, and slow breakdown of human endurance. The film was shot in an actual full-scale replica submarine built on hydraulic rigs. Petersen forced his cast to stay inside for months, filming in sequence so that their beards grew and their faces aged naturally. The actors lived in the same sweat-soaked uniforms, crawling through narrow, dripping corridors. Every sound of creaking metal and echoing water pressure was recorded authentically. Many scenes were shot with real explosions so close the camera shook with genuine terror. When Das Boot premiered in Germany, many surviving U-boat veterans attended special screenings. Some walked out halfway through, overcome by flashbacks of suffocation and death. They said they could smell the oil and feel the vibration of the engines once more. Television networks were hesitant to show it, fearing it would reopen the wounds of the past. But Petersen refused to cut or soften the horror because he believed truth mattered more than comfort. In the years that followed, Das Boot became the definitive submarine movie, influencing everything from Crimson Tide to The Hunt for Red October. It was praised by naval historians for its precision and condemned by some politicians for showing German soldiers as humans instead of villains. Yet it stood unshaken as a haunting masterpiece that captured the silence, the darkness, and the despair of men buried alive beneath the sea. Das Boot proved that real war is not fought for glory, but for the next breath. Number 14. Saving Private Ryan, 1998. When Steven Spielberg unleashed Saving Private Ryan, he did not aim to entertain, he aimed to resurrect D-Day itself. The film opened with a 20-minute assault on Omaha Beach that felt less like cinema and more like raw memory ripped from the souls of survivors. Veterans who were invited to early screenings broke down in tears. Some walked out unable to bear the realism. Others sat motionless in silence long after the credits ended. Spielberg and cinematographer Janusz Kaminski used handheld cameras, desaturated film stock, and stuttering shutter speeds to mimic authentic combat footage from 1944. The result was a world that looked drained of life and color. Every bullet crack and explosion was researched and reconstructed with near-religious devotion. Even the sounds of bullets hitting water were recorded live using vintage weapons. The cast went through a brutal boot camp run by real Marines to understand exhaustion, pain, and chaos. Tom Hanks described the experience as surviving a war inside a film. The Pentagon at first worried that the film's intensity would traumatize aging veterans, yet it soon became an unintentional form of therapy. Many former soldiers claimed that it finally showed the world what they had lived through when words had failed them for decades. Critics hailed it as both a technical achievement and a moral reckoning. The Department of Veterans Affairs even reported a rise in veterans seeking counseling after seeing the movie because the memories it stirred had long been buried. Beyond the blood and sand, the film carried a moral question about sacrifice. Was one life worth saving when so many were lost? Spielberg never answered it directly because war never offers clean answers. Saving Private Ryan stands today as the most respected portrayal of American soldiers in World War II. Its accuracy was not in the uniforms or weapons, but in the despair and exhaustion etched into every face. It showed that war ends only when memory does, and memory never truly dies. Number 13. Come and See, 1985. From the heart of Belarus came a film so unflinching, so merciless that even Soviet censors almost destroyed it. Elim Klimov's Come and See was not made for applause or awards, it was made to haunt. The film follows a peasant boy named Flyora who joins the partisans after Nazis invade his village. What begins as a dream of heroism becomes a waking nightmare of slaughter, starvation, and madness. There are no heroes in this story, only survivors whose souls are burned to ash. Klimov wanted truth, not illusion. He used real ammunition during shooting. He detonated live explosives near the young actor Alexei Kravchenko, who was only 14. The sound and terror you see on his face are not performed, they are lived. The boy aged visibly through filming. His hair turned gray from stress and malnutrition. The director worked under military supervision because even Soviet officials feared his methods were too dangerous. When Come and See premiered in 1985, many veterans who fought on the Eastern Front refused to finish it. They said it was too close, too real, too painful. There were reports of fainting and uncontrollable sobbing during screenings. Soviet television later banned regular broadcasts, claiming it could cause psychological trauma. For years, the film vanished into rumor, whispered about but rarely shown. Western critics discovered it later and were horrified by its power. Roger Ebert said watching it felt like being burned alive. Others compared it to staring into the soul of humanity and finding nothing but smoke. The film remains one of the few that refuses to glorify war in any form. It presents annihilation stripped of propaganda and drenched in silence. Come and See proved that the truest realism is not about detail, but about despair. It left behind not just an anti-war message, but a wound that still bleeds across generations. Number 12. The Thin Red Line, 1998. Terrence Malick's The Thin Red Line was unlike any war movie before or after it. It moved not with explosions, but with whispers. Instead of focusing on strategy or medals, it dove into the fragile souls of soldiers lost in the chaos of Guadalcanal. Every shot glowed with tropical beauty, yet beneath the sunlight lurked death waiting behind every blade of grass. Malick spent years writing and rewriting the script, determined to capture not the events of war, but the haunting stillness that exists between life and death. He used natural light, long takes, and philosophical narration to show how men crumble under fear and awe at the same time. Veterans who watched the film said it captured something no other movie dared to show. It was not the sound of combat that broke them, but the silence before the shots. Production became a legend in itself. The director filmed nearly 1 million feet of footage, then vanished into the editing room for 2 years, cutting famous actors like Adrian Brody and Gary Oldman out of the final version entirely. Executives were furious, yet Malick would not compromise. He said war is not a story about heroes, but about souls lost in nature's indifference. Some soldiers criticized the movie for being too poetic, but those who had truly seen battle praised it as painfully accurate in emotion and rhythm. Veterans claimed it captured the strange calm, the spiritual confusion, the beauty that somehow coexists with blood and screams. The Thin Red Line may not depict every tactic or uniform perfectly, but it showed the invisible truth, the moral exhaustion that lingers long after the guns fall silent. It proved that realism is not just about accuracy, it is about understanding the human cost that no victory can erase. Number 11. Letters from Iwo Jima, 2006. Clint Eastwood shocked Hollywood when he decided to make a World War II film from the perspective of the Japanese. Letters from Iwo Jima told the same battle as his earlier Flags of Our Fathers, but through the eyes of men doomed to lose. It stripped away propaganda, showing that courage and fear beat in every heart no matter what flag they serve. The film was shot in a palette of dust and ash using muted light to mirror the suffocating tunnels beneath Mount Suribachi. Japanese historians were hired to verify every uniform, insignia, and weapon. The letters read aloud in the film were based on real documents recovered from the battlefield decades later. Veterans from both nations attended early screenings, and some wept openly, saying it finally gave humanity to the enemy they never truly knew. Eastwood faced backlash from conservative American groups who accused him of romanticizing the enemy. But he refused to back down. He said that truth has no nationality. The Japanese government initially hesitated to promote it, fearing public discomfort with memories of defeat. Yet audiences around the world saw it for what it was, a requiem for all soldiers trapped in impossible wars. Behind the camera, the production endured volcanic weather sandstorms and sickness among the cast. Ken Watanabe, who played General Kurabayashi, spent days inside actual tunnel sets, breathing real volcanic dust to portray the suffocation his men endured. The result was authenticity carved in pain. When the film premiered, it received universal acclaim, and even American veterans praised it for its honesty. Letters from Iwo Jima showed that accuracy was not only in the details, but in empathy. It made the world realize that both sides bled the same. It was not about heroes or villains, it was about the futility of glory. Number 10. The Bridge on the River Kwai, 1957. When David Lean's The Bridge on the River Kwai debuted, it was hailed as an epic of pride and madness. It told the story of British prisoners of war forced by the Japanese to build a railway bridge in the Burmese jungle. The film's beauty and scope hit a psychological trap inside. It was not about victory, it was about the collapse of discipline, honor, and sanity. Lean filmed in the steaming jungles of Ceylon under brutal heat and constant danger from wildlife. He insisted that the bridge be built for real, not as a set. Workers and extras lived in mosquito-ridden camps where sickness spread faster than rumor. The humidity destroyed equipment every week, but Lean refused to use studio stages. He wanted audiences to feel the sweat and suffering on screen. When the film reached surviving POWs, reactions were divided. Some admired its craftsmanship, others were furious, claiming it romanticized their suffering. British veterans of the Burma Railway said the movie was too neat, too noble, that the real camps were far worse. Many refused to watch it again. The Japanese government objected to its portrayal of their soldiers as sadistic, yet historians confirmed that the brutality was historically accurate. Behind-the-scenes actor Alec Guinness nearly quit after clashing with Lean over his character's moral collapse. The tension between them mirrored the breakdown within the story itself. The film became a metaphor for pride devouring reason, a portrait of obedience turned into obsession. Decades later, the film's theme song, whistled by prisoners marching in line, still echoes as an ironic anthem. The Bridge on the River Kwai won Oscars, but its true achievement was exposing the madness that hides behind discipline. It reminded viewers that war does not always destroy from the outside, sometimes it consumes from within. Number 9. Band of Brothers, 2001. Though technically a miniseries, Band of Brothers felt more authentic than most feature films ever made. Produced by Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks, it followed Easy Company from their first jump into Normandy through the frozen nightmare of Bastogne to the fall of Hitler's Reich. It was not about plot or spectacle, it was about ordinary men thrust into extraordinary terror. Every actor underwent a month of real military training before filming. They learned to march, to fire, to freeze, and to follow orders as if they were truly paratroopers. The series shot on muddy fields and rain-soaked forests in England, recreating conditions that veterans instantly recognized. The cast lived in identical barracks, ate field rations, and wore the same sweat-stained gear for weeks. Veterans who attended the premiere said it was like watching ghosts walk again. The series did not shy away from the ugliness of survival. It showed trembling soldiers shooting at shadows and the exhaustion of carrying fallen friends. It captured the fear that followed every sunrise. The realism came not just from the props, but from the human details like shaking hands, blank stares, and the silent moments between bursts of gunfire. Behind the scenes, many veterans of Easy Company visited the set. Some wept, others gave advice to actors portraying their younger selves. Hanks and Spielberg made them part of the creative process, ensuring every step and line matched the truth. When the show aired, it stunned critics who called it the most accurate portrayal of American infantry life ever filmed. More than 2 decades later, Band of Brothers remains a living memorial. Its power lies in its precision and its heart. It showed that war is not about medals or speeches, but about the men who carried each other through fire. It proved that sometimes the truest stories are those too painful to forget. Number 8. Downfall, 2004. Oliver Hirschbiegel's Downfall took audiences inside Hitler's bunker during the final days of the Third Reich. It was claustrophobic, unrelenting, and so real that many Germans were horrified to see it at all. It portrayed Hitler not as a myth or monster, but as a decaying human filled with paranoia, delusion, and rage. The accuracy was chilling. Every hallway map and uniform came from meticulous historical research. The film's source material included first-hand accounts from survivors of the bunker who witnessed the regime crumble from within. Scenes of shouting matches, suicides, and despair were reconstructed with surgical precision. The production team used the actual layout of the bunker recreated in detail on sound stages that matched blueprints from captured Nazi archives. Even the lighting mimicked the dying glow of underground lamps used in 1945. When it premiered in Germany, the reaction was explosive. Some praised it for confronting history, others accused it of humanizing Hitler. Veterans who had fought on both sides said the realism of the final siege scenes was unbearable. The echo of Russian artillery, the shaking walls, and the exhaustion on soldiers' faces were too familiar. Bruno Ganz, who played Hitler, prepared obsessively, studying the dictator's final speeches frame by frame. The result was so convincing that real veterans of the Wehrmacht said they felt transported back to the bunker itself. The controversy made the film both feared and respected. It was banned from certain school screenings at first, then reinstated as an educational requirement because historians insisted students see the unfiltered truth. Today, Downfall stands as one of the most unsettlingly authentic depictions of collapse in cinematic history. It captures the precise moment when ideology dissolves into madness. The film's realism does not celebrate history, it confronts it, and that is why it left audiences shaking long after the credits rolled. Number 7. The Battle of Britain, 1969. Before digital effects or computer simulations, there was The Battle of Britain, a film that recreated the real air war using the actual machines that fought it. Directed by Guy Hamilton, it gathered over 100 real Spitfires, Hurricanes, and Messerschmitts flown by pilots who had once fought the same skies 29 years earlier. Veterans called it the closest thing to being back in combat without dying for real. The film told the story of the Royal Air Force's desperate defense against the Luftwaffe in 1940. Every aerial sequence was filmed for real with no tricks, no models, and no illusions. The production team tracked down surviving warplanes across Europe, restored them, and painted them in authentic squadron markings. Former pilots served as consultants, ensuring that flight maneuvers and radio chatter matched actual tactics. The film's realism came at a staggering cost. Several planes were damaged during filming, and one pilot narrowly escaped death in a crash landing. The roar of engines, the blinding sunlight, and the sudden dives into combat were so intense that even professional stunt flyers admitted to feeling fear. The editing stitched together hundreds of hours of flight footage to create a ballet of death that no modern CGI could match. When the Battle of Britain was released, veterans packed theaters across the United Kingdom. Some stood during the dogfight, saluting the screen, others wept silently. For them, it was not just a film, but a resurrection of lost comrades. Critics praised its authenticity, though some said it lacked human drama. But for those who lived through those skies, no fiction could come closer to truth. The film remains a monument to aerial realism, a time capsule of courage and chaos. It showed that war in the air was not about aces or victories, but about survival measured in seconds and altitude. The Battle of Britain proved that the most powerful special effect of all is reality itself. Number 6. Stalingrad, 1993. Joseph Vilsmeyer's Stalingrad was a brutal German film that ripped away every trace of heroism from World War II. It followed a platoon of Wehrmacht soldiers trapped in the frozen ruins of Stalingrad as the front collapsed around them. There were no grand speeches or triumphs, only hunger, frostbite, and hopelessness. The film was as suffocating as the winter it portrayed. The production took place in Poland and Slovakia, where temperatures dropped so low that cameras froze and actors suffered genuine frostbite. The set was not a set at all, but a wasteland of rubble built from real debris and snow. The uniforms were authentic down to the buttons and dirt stains. Even the sound design came from weapons of the era, fired in live conditions to capture their true echo. Many German veterans who watched Stalingrad said it was the first time they had seen their experience honestly reflected on screen. They remembered the same endless white horizon, the same starvation, the same disbelief that anyone could survive. Others refused to finish it, saying the memories were too sharp. Unlike most war films, Stalingrad offered no redemption. It ended not with victory, but with men freezing together in silence, buried under the snow they once marched across. Critics called it a masterpiece of despair. Some accused Vilsmeyer of being too merciless, yet that was his intent. He said he wanted to show the war as a curse, not a legend. When it premiered at festivals, audiences sat stunned, unable to clap. Its realism was too heavy to celebrate. Years later, historians and soldiers alike praised it for refusing propaganda and facing the truth head-on. Stalingrad was not about sides or symbols. It was about how all sides suffered in the same frozen hell. It reminded viewers that in war, the cold always wins. Number 5. Hacksaw Ridge, 2016. When Mel Gibson directed Hacksaw Ridge, he wanted to remind the world that courage does not always carry a gun. Based on the true story of Desmond Doss, a medic who refused to kill it, told of a man who walked through fire unarmed to save 75 lives during the Battle of Okinawa. Gibson insisted on raw accuracy. The crew studied the actual topography of Okinawa and rebuilt Hacksaw Ridge with perfect measurements. The mud, the smoke, and the screams were recreated exactly as veterans described them. Actors trained under military supervision, learning how to crawl through fire and drag wounded soldiers under real weight. Andrew Garfield spent months reading Doss's diaries and visiting the cliffs where the real rescues occurred. During production, real explosions and debris rained down on the set. Gibson filmed with handheld cameras to mimic the chaos of real combat photography. Every wound seen on screen was modeled after actual medical reports from the field. The violence was unflinching, but so was the compassion. When the film premiered, World War II veterans who had served in the Pacific were invited to private screenings. Many wept. They said it was the most faithful portrayal of what it felt like to fight and bleed on those islands. Some said it was so accurate they could smell the burning gunpowder and mud. Critics praised it as one of the most realistic depictions of the Pacific War ever made. Military historians confirmed that every maneuver and weapon was precise. Gibson's direction transformed the film into a visual prayer about faith and endurance. Hacksaw Ridge proved that accuracy is not only about detail, but about the truth of spirit. It honored a man who defied violence yet faced it more bravely than most soldiers with weapons ever could. Number 4. The Pianist, 2002. Roman Polanski's The Pianist was not just another war drama, it was his personal exorcism. Having survived the Krakow ghetto as a child, Polanski poured every memory of hunger, fear, and loss into the story of Ladislaw Szpilman, the Polish pianist who escaped death through music. Every street corner, every uniform, every building bombed into rubble was meticulously researched to match wartime Warsaw. The production team studied thousands of photographs and rebuilt entire districts destroyed in 1944. The cold gray lighting mirrored the ashen skies of occupied Poland. Adrian Brody lost more than 30 pounds for authenticity, living alone for weeks to understand starvation. When survivors and veterans of Warsaw saw the film, they were stunned. Some left in silence, others clutched their hands, unable to speak. One elderly woman who had lived through the uprising said the film felt less like a movie and more like time travel. The realism was not in blood, but in emptiness. The long silences and hollow streets spoke louder than any battle scene. Polanski refused to use sentimentality or orchestral glorification. He wanted the audience to feel isolation. The filming conditions were harsh. Sets were drenched in cold rain, real rubble was used, and actors shivered between takes. The result was visual truth stripped bare of fantasy. The film won the Palme d'Or and Academy Awards, but its real legacy lies in the hearts of those who survived. Veterans who lived through the German occupation said no other movie had captured the quiet terror of hiding the way The Pianist did. It was not about soldiers or strategies, but about survival of the soul. By the end, when Szpilman sits before a ruined piano and plays for an empty world, it becomes clear that accuracy is not about numbers or facts, but about emotion so real it hurts to watch. The Pianist remains a monument to the human spirit, surviving amid ashes. Number 3. The Great Escape, 1963. John Sturgis's The Great Escape became one of the most beloved war films ever made, but behind its charm and adventure lay painstaking truth. The film was based on a real escape from Stalag Luft III, where Allied prisoners of war tunneled out of German captivity in one of the most daring breakouts in military history. Veterans who lived through the ordeal later said that some scenes were so accurate they could barely breathe while watching them. The production team worked closely with former prisoners who had built the real tunnels named Tom, Dick, and Harry. The set designers recreated them down to the smallest detail. The hidden trapdoors, the air pumps, the claustrophobic wooden braces that groaned under weight. Actors crawled through real soil in tight shafts, lit only by lanterns. They filmed with real picks and shovels to mimic the sound and rhythm of digging for freedom. The tone of the movie may have been adventurous, but its foundation was true pain. Several of the original escapees were executed by the Gestapo after being caught, and their names appear silently at the end of the film. Veterans said that moment hit harder than any gunfight. It was a reminder that courage often ends in tragedy. During shooting in Germany, the cast and crew were visited by survivors of the actual camp. Many cried quietly during filming. They said it felt like stepping into their own memories decades later. Steve McQueen performed most of his motorcycle stunts himself, insisting on realism even though his character's legendary jump was fiction. Yet the movie captured the spirit of resistance perfectly. For veterans, it was a rare film that balanced truth with tribute. It was not a perfect documentary, but it made their story immortal. The Great Escape showed that authenticity is not only in suffering but in the determination to defy it. The film turned survival into art and history into a heartbeat that still echoes today. Number 2. Schindler's List, 1993. Steven Spielberg's Schindler's List was more than a film. It was a confession to history. It chronicled the real life of Oskar Schindler, the German industrialist who saved over 1,000 Jewish lives by employing them in his factory during the Holocaust. Its realism was so raw that Holocaust survivors who watched it said it felt like living the nightmare again. Spielberg shot the film entirely in black and white to evoke documentary footage from the war. Every location was authentic, every prop matched wartime evidence. The scenes were filmed in Krakow within walking distance of where the real events took place. Survivors of Schindler's factory visited the set and advised the crew on how the ghetto looked, sounded, and smelled. Many broke down during filming, unable to stay. The director forbade artificial lighting and background music during most of the concentration camp scenes to preserve emotional silence. Actors were instructed not to perform, but to endure. Liam Neeson's portrayal of Schindler and Ralph Fiennes' chilling role as Eamon Guth were so lifelike that even crew members had nightmares. When Spielberg showed the finished film to Holocaust survivors, they wept together in silence. Some could not finish it. The realism was unbearable but necessary. For years, the film was banned in several countries for being too disturbing, but educators and veterans fought for it to be shown because they believed it was a moral document. At the end of the movie, real survivors and their descendants appear placing stones on Schindler's grave. It was not acting. It was memory carved in light. Schindler's List became the ultimate testament to historical truth, proving that accuracy in storytelling is not about spectacle, but about conscience. The veterans who saw it said it did not just remind them of the past. It made them feel it all over again. Number 1. The Longest Day, 1962. Before Saving Private Ryan ever existed, The Longest Day stood as the definitive reconstruction of D-Day. Based on Cornelius Ryan's book, it brought together an international cast to tell the story of June 6, 1944 from every angle. The Allies, the Germans, and the civilians caught between them. It was one of the most ambitious war productions ever attempted and one of the most faithful. The filmmakers secured access to real D-Day landing sites in Normandy. Thousands of extras, many of them active soldiers, recreated the invasion using original landing craft and authentic uniforms supplied by military museums. Veterans of the actual landing served as consultants overseeing everything from weapon firing patterns to formation tactics. They said the scenes of chaos in the surf and the sounds of shelling were frighteningly familiar. Director Ken Anakin refused to use studio effects. Every explosion and gunfire sequence was filmed on location. To replicate the scale of the invasion, cinematographers used helicopters and cranes to match battlefield maps exactly. The multilingual dialogue captured the confusion of war better than any translation could. French citizens who had lived through the occupation said the film captured the eerie silence before the storm. When it premiered, veterans packed cinemas across Europe. Many stood in salute as the beaches filled with smoke on screen. Others left halfway through saying it was too real. Soldiers who had fought on Omaha and Utah Beach said it was like watching their youth unfold again in black and white. The longest day was a logistical miracle, but its soul lay in its respect for truth. It showed that even the grandest battles are made of terrified individuals fighting for moments of survival. It became the first great cinematic monument to realism in war. A film that did not glorify but remembered. Veterans called it a second Normandy, not in body but in spirit. War films often promise glory, but the ones that last deliver truth. These 15 stories did not just portray battles, they resurrected them. They made the men who fought remember and the generations after understand. Which of these films left you shaken the most? Let your thoughts echo below, and remember to like, subscribe, and keep history alive.